Today, we'll be covering a fascinating topic. But before we do that, how would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. Let's get into the video. Sparta was so assured of its military superiority that it went against traditional Greek fortifications and didn't bother to build walls to defend the city. Every male Spartan citizen was a warrior. But here are 5 that managed to get their names recorded in history. Agis I. Agis was one of the first Spartan kings, supposedly the son of one of the twins who, according to legend, founded Sparta. The Aegeid line of Spartan kings was named after him. While some ancient historians tell us that Agis I co-ruled, this was most likely an invention to make both lines of kings equal. There was also some dispute regarding the length of his rule. Some sources record it as 1 year, while others cite he was in power for 40 years. Most modern historians feel the latter is most likely, given the deeds attributed to him. Agis's main legacy was the establishment of the helot system. Sparta was able to raise and train such a large and professional army due to the many enslaved people who kept Sparta running. No Spartan citizen was allowed to work, which meant all the farming and other menial tasks were left to the enslaved people, called helots. Most historians agree Agis I captured, or at least subjugated, the city of Helos in Laconia. Supposedly, Laconia had been previously conquered by the Spartans but was granted autonomy. When Agis I came to power, he made Laconia submit to complete Spartan control. Helos resisted, and in retribution, their people were enslaved for their insurrection, creating the first helots. Without the helot system, the Spartans may never have been able to cultivate the warrior society for which they are famous. Cleomenes I. Cleomenes I ruled Sparta from around 519 until 491 BCE. His rule saw Sparta dominate the Peloponnese region. Cleomenes refused to send Spartan warriors overseas to fight the Persians, as he did not like spreading his forces too thin. He is most famous for his intervention in the affairs of Athens and inadvertently had a hand in the development of Athenian democracy. But that happened in a roundabout, unexpected way. Unbeknownst to Cleomenes, an Athenian aristocrat called Cleisthenes had bribed the Pythian priestess of Delphi into prophesizing that the Spartans should help the Athenians liberate themselves. Believing the prophecy, in 510, Cleomenes led the Spartan army into Attica in an attempt to depose Hippias, who was a tyrant ruler of Athens. Cleomenes personally led the successful attack on Hippias, besieging him in the Acropolis and handing power to the Athenian magistrates in around 511 BCE. Infighting then broke out between those magistrates. Cleisthenes, who wanted democracy in Athens, and Agis, a friend of Cleomenes, who had already secured an election a few years before and desired an oligarchy. In an attempt to counter Agis' claim to power, Cleisthenes introduced reforms giving more authority to the People's Assembly, or Demos. Cleomenes sided with Agis, and together they expelled Cleisthenes. This did not please the people, who overwhelmingly supported the introduction of democracy, and Cleomenes and Agis found themselves holed up in the Acropolis for 2 days to escape the crowd's wrath. Eventually, the two were allowed to leave, but 300 of Agis' supporters were executed. By overthrowing Hippias, the Spartan army had proved itself to be one of the most formidable in Greece. Later, Cleomenes clashed with the other Spartan king, Demaratus. Sparta had 2 kings who ruled simultaneously. The quarrel reached a head over Cleomenes' strike at the Aeginetans. Cleomenes started a rumor that Demaratus was illegitimate and bribed the oracle to confirm the claim. Demaratus was exiled, and Cleomenes, along with the new king, were able to oust the pro-Persians in Aegina. Eventually, Cleomenes was imprisoned for his apparent madness and the revelation that he had bribed the oracle at Delphi. He supposedly committed suicide in prison, although modern historians theorize that he was probably killed. Leonidas I. Leonidas I, who was king of Sparta until he died in 480 BCE, is probably the most famous Spartan in history. While many of us will now know the name due to the 2006 film 300, not to mention its subsequent memes, The Greeks preserved the memory of the warrior king Leonidas through tales of his heroism. Since Sparta left no historical records, we know about Leonidas and other Spartans on this list primarily through the Greek historian Herodotus. Leonidas was the son of King Anaxandridas II and ascended to the throne after the violent and mysterious death of his older half-brother Cleomenes I. Being the prince did not spare Leonidas from the rigorous mental and physical training that all Spartan boys endured. As such, he grew up a fierce warrior who was versed in Spartan military tactics. Leonidas secured his place in history when the Persian army under Xerxes I marched through Greece, intending to conquer the region. Under normal circumstances, the Greek city-states vied for power and resources, but under the threat of a Persian invasion, many of the Greek communities sent soldiers to form a united army under Leonidas. The army consisted of around 6,000 to 7,000 Greeks and 300 Spartans, and they headed to a narrow coastal path called Thermopylae. At the time, this mountain pass was by the sea and got its name, meaning hot gates, from the hot sulfur springs in the area. Leonidas wanted to take advantage of the natural bottleneck to slow down the Persian army and force them to funnel their forces towards the Greeks. For 3 days, the Greeks were able to fight off the Persians. His plan may have worked if it weren't for a local shepherd called Ephialtes, who showed the Persians a local mountain path that would lead the Persians to the rear of the Greek forces. Once the Greeks realized they were surrounded, they knew that defeat was imminent. Many Greeks retreated, sent home by Leonidas, but the Spartans stayed, along with some Thebans and Thespians. Leonidas had visited the Oracle of Delphi before the battle and was told that either Sparta would be destroyed by the Persians or Leonidas would lose his life. The remaining Greek forces at Thermopylae were decimated, and the Persians continued down the Greek coast. However, the sacrifice made by Leonidas, his men, and allies went down in Greek history and inspired the Greeks to continue resisting the Persians until the Second Greco-Persian War ended with a Greek victory in 479 BCE. Dionysius, Eurytus, and Aristodemus. Okay, so this is 3 soldiers, which technically brings our total to 7, but they are all famous for their part in history regarding the Battle of Thermopylae. They also happen to be the only ones on the list who weren't kings. First, Dionysius. Of all the 300 Spartans that fought at Thermopylae, he was reported to be the bravest. Even in the time of the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, Dionysius was extremely quotable. Herodotus writes, "Thus nobly did the whole body of Lacedaemonians and Thespians behave. But nevertheless, one man is said to have distinguished himself above all the rest, to wit, Dionysius the Spartan. A speech which he made before the Greeks engaged the Medes remains on record. One of the Trachinians told him such was the number of the barbarians that when they shot forth their arrows, the sun would be darkened by their multitude. Dionysius, not at all frightened at these words, but making light of the Median numbers, answered, 'Our Trachinian friend brings us excellent tidings. If the Medes darken the sun, we shall have our fight in the shade.' Other sayings, too, of a like nature are reported to have been left on record by this same person." According to Herodotus, Eurytus and Aristodemus did not fight in the final epic battle. Both had contracted an eye disease that left them blind, so they were deemed unfit to fight, and Leonidas ordered that they return home. Eurytus returned to the fray and died a hero, but Aristodemus followed the final orders given to him by his king and returned to Sparta. Upon his return, he was shunned by his fellow Spartans. Since Eurytus had sacrificed himself in battle, Aristodemus was branded a coward. In Sparta, the label of coward did more than hurt people's feelings. Aristodemus could not hope to attract a bride and had no civil rights. In an attempt to redeem himself, he fought fiercely in the Battle of Plataea the following year. Still, he again drew scorn for losing control and endangering his fellow warriors by not demonstrating discipline. The fact he was seriously injured in the battle was not enough to win him any reprieve, and he was accused of insanity. Nevertheless, he continued to fight in the Greek-Persian Wars until the end. Clambrotis. Not all Spartan warriors changed history in Sparta's favor, and Clambrotis led Sparta to a defeat that ended its winning streak and ruined the Spartan army's flawless reputation. From 376 to 375, the Spartans suffered a couple of humiliating naval defeats, but their loss at the Battle of Leuctra in 371 cemented their downfall. The Greek city-states of Sparta, Athens, and Thebes were constantly vying for power. In around 372, they entered peace negotiations. These talks were tense and ultimately ended in Clambrotis invading Boeotia. Thebes blocked many of the direct routes, but Clambrotis crossed the mountains and defeated the Theban force there. In 371, Cleomenes marched his army to Leuctra, southeast of Thespiae. The Thebans were outnumbered and, according to Spartans' track record, outmatched. However, the Spartans' downfall was their rigidity. The Spartans figured, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and had never updated or altered their military tactics. Unfortunately for them, this meant that the other Greek city-states were familiar with their formations and fighting style. The Theban general Epaminondas decided to strengthen his right flank, posting soldiers 50 deep and fronting it with the Sacred Band, a troop of same-sex couples renowned for their prowess in battle. After a decisive cavalry clash, the Spartans quickly lost any advantage, and the retreating men disrupted the main Spartan line as the 50-deep column of Thebans attacked. Epaminondas had his right wing of men, which was weakened due to the abundance of men on the left, fall back slightly, further disadvantaging the Spartans, who attacked in a straight line. Soon, Clambrotis was mortally wounded, along with many of the Spartan leaders. Eventually, the Spartan forces retreated to their camp and admitted defeat. Several theories have been postulated as to what brought about this fall in the dominance of the Spartan army. One was their failure to update their tactics, but the other was the rate at which they lost men in battle. Historians speculate that the Peloponnesian War had caused the number of Spartan warriors to decline rapidly. This decline, coupled with Sparta being a closed society, led some to believe that inbreeding had become a serious issue. Their defeat at Leuctra was a major factor in the collapse of Spartan power. It showed they were fallible, led to a loss of military dominance, and resulted in its eventual incorporation into the Achaean League in 146 BCE. Sparta had one of the most famous armies in history. However, since the Spartans don't have any surviving historical records, most of these fierce warriors died without history recording their names. We have Herodotus to thank for our limited knowledge of the Spartans, their exploits, and their famous warriors. To learn more about Sparta, check out our book, Sparta, a captivating guide to the Spartans, Greco-Persian Wars, Battle of Thermopylae, and Peloponnesian War. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.